Good evening, everyone, everywhere, especially here in Hardin County, Kentucky. It is the 23rd of January, and this is Spencer Keck coming at you live with the Hillbilly Think Tank. And I am the educated hillbilly. No, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. I'm coming at you, like I said, live, and I'm coming at you from Tunnel Hills here in Hardin County, Kentucky, where we are dedicated to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, y'all, so apparently Captain Bonespurs decided to insult NATO combat veterans. Are there no brave veterans he feels he cannot insult? He, over in NATO, where he was speaking at Davos, he insulted veterans there by saying that the NATO veterans stayed a little off the front lines. Now, this is from a man who's never been on the front lines in his lifetime with bullets flying by and a carbine in his hand. As we all know, he got a deferment from Vietnam for bone spurs, even though he was in the marching drill club and unit at the private school he went to. He had no problem, being in the band and marching and like that. But I guess putting on combat boots to march would hurt these little bone spurs too much. Can't tell you how many veterans I know, including myself, that have bone spurs, and we still went and took the fight to the enemy for our nation. So, yeah, tell me all about it, Donnie. Well, anyway, I said the NATO veterans say that Trump crossed the line questioning their Afghanistan service. And absolutely he did. I know from experience, we had veterans from Australia, combat troops from Australia, now they're veterans, combat troops from France, the French Foreign Legion. We had British Royal Air Force. We had British SAS. We had all kinds of British forces, you name it, Polish forces. All these guys were on the direct front lines with us, with our U.S. forces, as that was a NATO operation. When we were attacked in September 11th, that triggered the NATO alliance. And I remember at the same time in the beginning of the war, I was on a ship with Marines. We were out floating in the Pacific like Marines do on deployment, waiting for something to happen. Of course, it did. We were in Australia when the attack happened. But there is a famous picture you can find of a French ship asking to come up alongside a U.S. Navy ship. And as it floated by, it had a big banner unfurled that said, "America, we stand by you and we are joining you in the fight." So you try to tell me that NATO veterans aren't just as engaged and didn't engage just as much as we did, and you're full of it. It's that simple. So there is someone that is full of it and absolutely should be ashamed for saying this to our beloved veterans that served right alongside of us, you know. So there's just no call for this. And why is this something that I feel I need to talk about here in Hardin County where I'm running for magistrate? Well, truth is, we have at Fort Knox 635 personnel that are part of the U.S. Army's V Corps headquarters, which is there at Fort Knox. And that is a primary command element that coordinates United States and NATO allied operations in Europe. We have folks in Poland constantly going from V Corps and being, going over to Poland where we have NATO troops and we're actively deploying. So for us veterans here in this area and all over the United States, we know better. We know that we fought right alongside NATO troops, North Atlantic Trade Organization allied troops from every single NATO nation. And to act like they weren't on the front lines with us, you just come and talk to some veterans in this area, and they'll tell you, Captain Bonespurs, that's a bunch of bullshit. And yeah, that's a military term because we constantly serve with them, and we constantly, with V Corps out of Fort Knox, they maintain a shoulder-to-shoulder partnership with NATO allies in Europe, frequently deploying, like I said, soldiers from Kentucky for exercises and support. So I just don't know if there's not some veterans that this guy doesn't think he can insult. Wasn't enough that he insulted a man who was tortured for a long time, many, 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 many years. And that man's name is Senator McCain. He was tortured in Vietnam. And when the Vietnamese government figured out that he was the son of a very important military and political figure, his dad, McCain was offered to be released early from captivity, and he refused. He would not leave his men behind. If they couldn't go with him, he wouldn't go. And that is the honor, courage, and commitment that we expect from our leaders when we're prisoners of war. So he went on and had many more years of torture, crippling torture. And that's something that, Donnie knows nothing about, even though he said he likes guys that don't get captured. Yeah. I'm sure he does. So, y'all, what do you think about this? Is Captain Bonespurs going over the tips of his skis when he says that we, just blatantly insults the countries that were by our side in our 20-year war? I don't know if the world can take much more of this. I wish that this nation would realize we can't take much more of this. This is not what we need to do to our best friends. You don't treat your best friends in this manner. It's bad enough that we're making trade enemies with the North Atlantic Trade Organization countries with tariffs for just anything that they do. They fart at the wrong time of the day. Oh, 200% tariff. Okay. When is the nonsense going to be enough? When is the legislative body of our federal government going to say, okay, enough's enough. You've got to stop it now. We're going to do what the Constitution says, and we're going to be one of three bodies that is able to put a halt on another body of government when it crosses the line. There's supposed to be a checks and balances between the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And right now, there are no checks and balances on the executive branch. It's that simple. This is not what our Constitution set up. And when I raised my hand to join the military, and every time that I reenlisted, I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the United States says that there's supposed to be checks and balances when one of the three branches of government tries to have more power than the other and tries to abuse its power. When are we going to get back to it? All right, y'all. See if you guys got any opinions on this. Any opinions? If you got any opinions, go in there and type it in our comment block. So, what do we think about old Captain Bonespurs and his insults to NATO combat veterans? You know, other members of NATO nations that fought right alongside us in combat. Surely we got some combat vets online here. They got some ideas about this. And if you're not a combat vet, you should still have, an idea about what you think of insulting our dearest allies, the folks that when we joined World War I late, they had already been fighting and dying for years before we joined in World War I. We got in and got to get some glory in World War I, but these same allies had been fighting forever. According to Trump, it was all us. No, we came in the very last tail of World War I. World War II, we also came in late. And when we did, it wasn't just us that won that war. We were a very big part of it. But if it hadn't been for the millions dying on the Eastern Front, there wouldn't have been a possibility of the rest of the Allies winning that war. So that's just something that, you can go check your history books and look at. Now, when it comes to our war in Afghanistan, again, we didn't have to start a conscription of young men and women here in the United States. Didn't have to start a draft and enact it because we had NATO allies that fought right alongside of us. If we hadn't, we would have had to start a draft and start conscripting young men and women who didn't want to join, who didn't go ahead and volunteer and raise their hand like 6% and less did during the 20-year war. So, all right, y'all. This is my 2 cents, but again, it does mean something to Hardin County that our NATO allies in Britain, France, Poland,
what the policy
Australia,
is correct.
You think,
sure, I have to agree. I have to agree with the second statement there. When federal officials violate the law.
So, yeah, this cannot stand for much longer. All right, so y'all, if you would hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. I appreciate the fact. Last time I looked, my gosh, I've got 150 subscribers. That really helps me out a lot. Remember, I am running for magistrate here in Hardin County, District 3. And y'all, appreciate your vote. Because in Kentucky, united we stand, divided we fall. We are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. We love our neighbors as ourselves. here in Hardin County, Kentucky, and all of Kentucky. Bless our corazon. You have a great one. Now, we got one comment though to post here before we go. So the strange one says Trump cares nothing for service of any form. To him, if it doesn't financially benefit yourself, you're stupid for doing it. And that's exactly what General Kelly said that Trump said, you know, that they were suckers and losers, those guys who had died there at the gravesite that he refused to go visit because it was raining and was going to mess his hair up. Yeah. So thanks to Strange One for making that comment. That's absolutely the way it is. He sees everything in life as transactional. You know, if you're not making a windfall from it, if you're not grifting, then you are stupid for doing it. Appreciate that. That is absolutely a great comment to go out on. That's I couldn't have said it better. Thank you very much. And y'all, hopefully we can take note of that and decide, all right, so now what can we do to stop this nonsense?